Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Neptune stage. I'm Matt Cutler. I'm founder and CEO of Blocknative, and we're going to spend about the next 20 minutes or so talking about real-time observability in the Ethereum ecosystem. It's pretty interesting. The past few sessions that have been on the stage are all about sort of the regulatory environment, and this stuff has a lot of implications for the regulatory environment. And this is going to be a session where I'm not just going to show you some stuff. I'm going to encourage you to start to experiment on your own. So this is not necessarily going to be a happy tale. Okay, there's a graphic novel from 1986, which is almost 40 years ago, called The Watchmen. And The Watchmen is about a dystopian view of a society where there's superheroes who are basically like really powerful but kind of regular people with flaws. And they're not just always good all the time. They're kind of self-interested. And they kind of get out of favor, and there's this whole saying about who watches the Watchmen, because they kind of have godlike superpowers, but they're not necessarily always used for good. And this is a little bit of what's known as foreshadowing for the current state of affairs on the Ethereum network. Because there's a number of superhero-like entities that have sort of godlike powers. It's not entirely clear if they're always being used to everyone's benefit. And this is why we need observability. So we're going to talk about observability, some new capabilities, new data, new pathways, actually do some live demos, and then do a little bit on looking ahead. So what is observability? Observability is something which actually comes out of the cloud apps world. And it's this idea that you can look inside a live system, know all the individual states, and try to understand what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing. So imagine you have a cloud application, right? You have your own code. It's interfacing with other people's code. There's some open APIs you're using various cloud providers like Google and Amazon, and then it slows down, and you're like, why the hell is my cloud application slow right now? You need observability to be able to see inside to see why it's behaving the way that it is. And so, oh, you can't see that, there's a cloud there. But like this is the classic observability challenge. You know, why? Oh, that's why, right? So now we have this new class of application. It's called the Web3 public blockchain. It's composed of an incredibly complex array of individual technologies, abstractions, modular systems, infrastructure, network, peer-to-peer layer. And observability here is the ability to sort of see inside of that and understand not just what it's doing, but why everything is happening the way that it is. And this is what we specialize in, our project Blocknative. And what we tend to find is the theory of how this stuff works can be actually quite a bit different from the reality of how it works. And that's why observability is so important. So we're trying to see like what's happening inside of Ethereum, and like the nice way, the happy version is like, it's a watch. Look at this fancy watch face. Isn't that clever? And we turn it over, and like there's this complex inner working, but it's really neat to see it all work together. It's jeweled, it's so perfect. But the reality is more like this, that there are users paid more than $60 million in fees to settle down to the base layer last year from L2s. Malicious MEVs costing users billions. OFAC violations which we have to deal with. Each violation carries up to 30 million in fines and up to 30 years in jail. And these are all things you need strong observability to deal with and manage. And under the covers, there's this whole system called MEV Boost, which is basically how blocks are produced. And this is an observability dashboard called MEV Boost Pix by Tony from the Ethereum Foundation. And it says, MEV Boost blocks over the past 14 days, 90.9% of all blocks produced are outsourced to this thing called MEV Boost. Now, many of you may not be familiar with MEV Boost, but it's like where blocks come from. And the interesting question is, why do 9 out of 10 blocks come not from the validators, but come from this third-party system, this very complicated third-party system? And the reason, there it is that the ecosystem of MEV Boost produces blocks that are 5 times as valuable as internally generated blocks. So there's a very clear economic incentive if you're a validator or a staking pool to outsource block production to this MEV Boost ecosystem, because you basically make 5x the rewards and then can offer greater APY and attract more stake, right? Great economic incentives. Except 86% of all of those blocks produced in the past 7 days were built by 3 builders. 3 builders produced 86% of the 90% of blocks. So call it 80% of all blocks. By the way, this is called rated network, what we're looking at here, another observability dashboard. So that's not so decentralized. That 86% of the time you got to talk to one of these 3 builders. And who are those builders? Well, now we're looking at relayscan.io, and we can see right here they're called Beaver Build, Titan, and rsync Builder, also known as Wintermute. And over the past 7 days, they have together built more than 86% of the blocks. Do you know that for your transactions to get on chain, you got to work with them? What happens if one of these entities doesn't like you? Or more likely, one of these entities is running a strategy that competes with what you're trying to do. Not great, right? And significantly, why do they do this? Why are builders doing what they're doing? This is the builder profitability of those 3 builders over the past 7 days. And I know it's sort of hard to read here, but it's 1,483 ETH in profit to the builders, to these top 3 builders over the past 7 days. And the math here is about 1,500 ETH, about 3,350 USD ETH, about $5 million per week, or $260 million per year is being generated in profit from the builder network that undergirds how your transactions get on chain, okay? And so the economics here are pretty interesting. There's a lot of money flowing around, and the question is, what are the builders doing? How does this stuff work? Is your transaction being treated fairly? And again, this is why we need observability. So when we say who watches the watchman, it's really who watches the settlement, okay? So we have these builders who talk to relays, who deal with stuff in the public mempool. There's private order flow, searchers, and validators. But there's also like now intents and bundlers and paymasters, and pretty soon we're going to have blob pools and bid pools and swaps and L2s and L1s and censorship and bridges and delays and OFAC. And these are all realities of the network today. All stuff that involves ephemeral data layers. There's no permanent record of what's going on, all of which contribute and combine to determine settlement. Which transactions get included on the chain and in what order, okay? And so this is a pretty interesting set of challenges if we're trying to build a credibly neutral foundation for the next economy. If we're trying to build something where it's not a 2-lane system full of have and have-nots, dominated by information asymmetries, like we have in the traditional financial system, but is basically a level playing field for all the participants. And so this is why we have really worked hard on this notion of observability to say, hey, we need to be able to see what's going on. Not just really high-end skilled people or really experienced people, but pretty much anyone on the network should have access to these systems so that you can decide for yourself, are you being treated fairly and what's going on? And so we've recently introduced this capability called ethernow.xyz, and I encourage you to go check that out. It's a new capability made possible by a grant from the Ethereum Foundation, and it's basically a starting point framework that we're building out now, and we're going to be inviting the community to build out as well. And there's some terms down here. And it basically tries to do 3 things. Answer the question, what's happening on Ethereum right now, okay? Which is an interesting problem, because if you were to want to know what's going on right now, where would you go? What is the thing or system or service you look at to see what's going on in real time at this moment? And one of the things we discovered was there's not really good resources for the general population or the researcher population, and so we're making these available. Then a real-time transaction explorer to basically allow anyone to be able to view the public mempool, sort of an Etherscan-like interface, but for the real-time ephemeral data layers underneath. And then all of that written down to a historical data archive measured in terabytes so that researchers can replay historic events and do net new research. And so we're going to dive into that. So I'm going to switch over here, and this is what's happening on Ethereum right now. This is ethernow.xyz, again, made possible by a grant from the Ethereum Foundation. And we can see the current block number, or the last block number, the amount of ETH burned in the last block, the current ETH USD exchange rate, and the total value staked. And then over here, of course, it's always a live demo. See, I might need to refresh this. Or maybe all of y'all are going on the network right now and it's slow. Well, there should be a countdown timer over here that's giving the countdown to the next block, the gas price of the current base fee, the number of marketable transactions in the mempool, the percent private in the mempool, and then basically these things like the current value of the ETH transfer value in flight and the current stablecoin value in flight, the current DeFi swap value, and the number of optimistic L2 transactions. I'm going to try this. Oh, let's see. Is it going to go? I'm on the Wi-Fi. Come on, baby. This is always the way of things. Whenever you do a live demo, you always have a network issue. Well, it's going to be a little less fun then. OK, so if we look into this, it's more fun if we do it all live. Luckily, I have some stuff put up here. We can then click through and we can look into, see, I'm hoping this is going to live. It's not coming through. We can look into things like the transaction journey. So this is now we're looking into the public mempool, and we can look at the story of individual transactions when it entered the mempool, and then its journey through. So sometimes, usually they're pending and they're replaced, but often, or sorry, they're pending and they're confirmed, but then they go through and they actually get really interesting when people start to swap them out for new transactions, and you can have these really interesting and complex journeys that go all the way down to being confirmed. We can look inside the batches of optimistic L2 rollups, and we can see not just when something like Optimism writes down to the L2 to the L1, but we can look inside and see the transactions themselves that make it up. So if you're a user of Optimism or a developer for Optimism, you can then programmatically be able to show to your users basically every stage of the transaction journey, from what's happening on Optimism itself to its ultimate settlement on Ethereum L1 underneath. I'm going to go back here. I'm trying one more time. Let's see here. It's not going to go. OK. But what starts to happen is interesting. So we have this notion of public transactions that they get transmitted to the public mempool. You can also have private transactions. Private transactions are transmitted directly to builders and get included in blocks without ever being broadcast to the peer-to-peer network. And the reason why I'd want to do that is you're, say, a searcher who's trying to affect ordering. So basically, you want a certain set of transactions to be included in a certain way, or you have a large trade that you don't want to have front run, or you're participating in an NFT drop and you want to make sure you get included. There's basically sort of back doors into the network where you can transmit transactions privately to these builders, and they can then insert them, and they just appear on chain. And so this utility is the only public utility for watching private transactions, because basically what happens is these private transactions show up on chain out of the clear blue sky. They never appear as pending. But we start to see weird things as well. This is a block. This is block number, just so I can read it out, 18721577. Most blocks have 100 to 200 transactions. This block has 5. They're all private. And basically, a block has a gas limit. You're trying to fill it up to about 50%. This block, it's used 2.55%. So a builder basically decided, hey, there's 5 transactions that are really important that I need to get in now, and I'm just going to put them in and not anything else. I just want to make sure that there's no other interactions between transactions going on chain and what I'm doing here. And so basically, this block is a massive underutilization of block space. The only way to get included in this block were to then transmit privately to this specific builder. And the interesting question here is, why did this builder do that, right? And I say this because the interesting thing here is, these tools, this observability, you can watch these blocks as they go by. Now, typically, a block is anywhere from 10 to 15% private these days, but every now and again, you'll see one that's a lot higher percentage or has a weird construction, or the ordering is strange. And then the question is, why is that happening that way? What is the incentives? What's the reason behind all of this? And this is what observability is all about. It's all about this notion that we can get into this. I'm going to try this one more time. See, it's just a Wi-Fi connection. Let's see. And really get into what's going on. And the whole point is you don't need to be a PhD to do this stuff. Now with this generation of tools, anyone can get in and make this stuff happen. Ugh. So it's partially behaving, it's partially not. We have support coming in all of this for EIP 4844 as part of Denkun. So you can see here we're looking at type 3 transactions on the Sepolia testnet, and we'll be doing that on mainnet, hopefully right at the launch as well of the hard fork. And then we have this historic mempool data archive, which enables researchers to go back, download terabytes of data potentially, and go back through and investigate anomalies. And this has been used for some pretty interesting purposes. I'm going to switch back. My Wi-Fi is not cooperating to my deck. And here's an example of some research that we did using our archive, which basically helped figure out that one of these superheroes, builders, was not providing MEV rebates that were promised to end users. Okay? And so there's a process by which you submit transactions, and if there's MEV, you're due a rebate, and there's a whole bunch of agreements that are made associated with that, but there's no observability inside of that, meaning you're just kind of trusting these actors to do the work that they say they're going to do, and there's a bunch of assumptions in the stack underneath the covers, and it turned out in this case that there was a builder that had a back-running bot that was misconfigured and was basically accidentally stealing refunds from transactions that flowed through them. And the only way that we were able to detect that this was going on, to notify the wallet, to work with the builder, to identify the bot, and to fix everything, was because of the observability infrastructure that we have and because of the use of research and archive there. And so today, as we look at the complexity of the network, as we look at the number of actors in the network, and we think about, okay, what if one of these is misconfigured? What if one of these, the trust assumptions associated with it, combines with a different set of trust assumptions? Does that create an edge? Does that create a profit opportunity? Does that create a data leak? Most of the time what we have seen is where there's problems, it's not malicious action. It is just something not behaving the way that it was expected to do. But as the amount of value flowing through the network increases, the economic incentives to play games here goes way up, okay? And so this is why this notion of observability is so important. And as regulators start to look into our world and say, hey, is this fair? Or is there market manipulation happening? The presence of observability and the number of people who are participating in observing and being witness to the network, those of you who are watching the Watchmen, I think will really help say, oh yeah, this is a very transparent network. Oh yeah, this is very well understood. Oh yeah, this is self-correcting. And so this is why we care very deeply about this topic and why I encourage you to participate in this process as well. There's been a whole bunch of research that's been published based on our data, both publicly accessible dashboards, a lot of tweet activity out there, research papers from folks like Uniswap and others, and more. So if you're an academic researcher and you're looking for something new to discover, we know that there's a ton of new things to be found in this data set. We're a relatively small team. We're good at collecting data, but our data science capability is limited, so this is why we're opening it up as part of what we're doing. And there's new stuff coming online all the time, new tactics, new bots, new strategies, new protocols, new capabilities in the network like 4844 that are going to be whole new research vistas moving forward, which we're super excited about. So this is why we're building this stuff out and why we think observability is a really critical topic for the ecosystem right now, and we want to encourage as much participation as possible. If you want to start your observability journey, go to ethernow.xyz, join our Discord. We'd love to hear from you. We're trying to make this stuff better all the time, and really appreciate everybody being here today. So I'm Matt from Blocknative, talking all about real-time observability and the unexpected inner workings of Ethereum. Thanks very much. Cheers.